Golden State Media Concepts Baseball Podcast. We cover everything Major League, from spring training to the World Series. We've got your favorite club covered, from New York to Boston to LA. This is the Golden State Media Concepts Baseball Podcast.
Hello, and thank you for tuning into the GSMC Baseball Podcast, brought to you by the GSMC Podcast Network. I am your host, Kevin Mahalik, as always, and this is episode 175 of the GSMC Baseball Podcast. I appreciate you guys listening wherever you are, Apple Podcasts, Spotify, Stitcher, across all podcast platforms. We are available. Share us with your friends, share us with a family member, anybody out there who's a baseball fan. We would really appreciate it. We did get a review. I will read that for you guys here on the pod later on in today's episode, but I want to give a shout out to Athletic SEC, who left us a comment on the Apple Podcast feed. We appreciate you listening to the show wherever you may be out there. SEC, maybe down in the Southeastern Conference, who knows? But I appreciate you listening wherever you are out there. Once again, jumping right into it, guys, the news continues around the coronavirus. And I just want to keep everyone listening out there updated on what exactly is going on, both internationally as well as domestically here in the U.S. We'll focus on the U.S., but I know this podcast is available globally, so we could have some listeners out there not located in the U.S., so we want to give an update on what's going on for those individuals. So worldwide, as of right now, March 29th, recording this Sunday evening, we, as a human race, have hit 700,000 positive cases of the coronavirus globally. It's been expediting, increasing exponentially. On the 24th, we had 400,000. It's been taking 2 days for every 100,000. So on the 26th, we hit 500,000. On the 28th, 600,000, and then here on the 29th, 700,000. So this weekend, we've gone up a couple 100,000 across the globe, and then locally here in the United States, we now have over 125,000 confirmed cases. Now, obviously, that sounds like a ton of confirmed cases, but I do also want to read that we have tested now over 894,000 people. So almost 900,000, almost 1 million tests have been provided out there, and 125,000 confirmed cases. So both of those numbers exponential. The amount of tests that are being done continue to increase as the availability to the tests continues to increase, and I think this has been critical for the U.S. as well as everybody else out there to try to get in front of this disease, is almost to test every single person who's showing any sort of symptoms to understand who may or may not have this virus, although that is one caveat that is very difficult to understand about what's going on, is that there are some individuals specifically within the sports world, this being a baseball podcast, it's NBA players who have tested positive who haven't shown any symptoms. So there's individuals like myself, like you listening out there, who isn't showing any symptoms that could possibly be infected. Now, I'm not trying to cause a panic, or I'm not trying to cause a stir out there for anybody listening. I'm just saying that if you have it and don't show any symptoms, I don't want to say good for you, but it's one of those cases where that's why everybody needs to stay home as much as they can, regardless of if they're showing symptoms or not, because even if you're not, there's no reason for you to go get tested. You could still be positive and still be spreading it to others whose bodies may not react the same way yours is to this virus. They could obviously have a much worse experience and, don't want to blame yourself for spreading the virus that you didn't know you had. So still a very, very tricky situation out there in regards to finding who does have the virus. Obviously, people showing the signs should go get tested immediately wherever you're located out there. More and more remote test facilities or remote test sites here in Philadelphia. They're using Citizens Bank Park, the Phillies ballpark and parking lot, for a drive-up testing facility for individuals, continuing to expand options for the greater city of Philadelphia and, its 5 million or so population, giving them guidelines on how to react. And speaking of guidelines, good transition there, as President Trump expands the social distancing guidelines through the month of April. So through April 30th, he had communicated over the past couple of days that he was hoping to open things back up slightly by Easter, which after doing some research is April 12th. And now he has come out as of Sunday night and discussed about how that was very ambitious and you do not want to declare victory before you've ultimately won the battle. So he's shutting down and continuing the social distancing guidelines through the month of April, which they seem to be working, a little bit here. I'm no expert, but I did see some good news out there within the Twitter sphere, and I love to share good news with everybody out there on the podcast whenever I can regarding the coronavirus and obviously everything that's taking place out there. So the two areas I wanted to talk about were looking at graphs for new deaths in the United States. Once again, a difficult subject to talk about, but just based on numbers alone, the 27th, there were 382 new deaths, the 28th, 534, and then here on the 29th, down to 272. So yes, 272 more individuals lost the battle to COVID-19. However, that is down from 534. So for the first time, that curve went down instead of continuing to go up and even at a greater clip. So that could be a good sign for the first time for a lot of us out there that this distancing is working to quote-unquote flatten the curve. And another flatten the curve positive graph is just new daily cases for COVID-19 across the U.S. Once again, this weekend, from the 5th to the 26th, it went from 12 to 17, and then it's 19, 18, and 18. So over the course of the last 4 days, the line is starting to flatten, as opposed to earlier it went from 9 to 12, 12 to 17, 17 to 19, and now it's kind of steadied itself around 18,500 the past couple of days. And if it continues there, obviously that would be flat, and that's where, yes, it's still spreading to 18,000 new individuals every day, but again, it's not growing or spreading at that exponential rate to where it overwhelms the healthcare system and the hospital center. And unfortunately, it is one of those things where it does look like this is going to be around for a long time. There's going to be waves. Yes, this initial wave, okay, we're going to lighten up restrictions. Well, now there's new individuals who are going to catch this virus and be affected with it kind of on this second wave. Well, the reason we almost need the waves and the reason we're trying to flatten the curve is specifically the healthcare system. Even though totally the same amount of individuals could contract this virus if we were to live our lives as normal and continue through the economy, it would just be the number of bodies at a given time that would need assistance from the hospitals and from the healthcare system as a whole. And that's why we need to try to slow the spread to allow our resources to catch up and hopefully limit the instances where we don't have enough supplies to care for individuals who need that care. But again, I wanted to give you guys some positivity there. I know this is a scary time, a bunch of numbers being floated around, some models talking about millions of deaths for Americans. Again, President Trump, he talked about how the goal is to keep it below 200,000. That sounds like an extremely high number for total deaths. We're at 125 confirmed cases. So if we're under 200,000 deaths, that does mean the cases are going to get into the millions. And reading between the lines there, obviously the government anticipates 1 million plus being infected and hopefully almost, under 200,000 deaths would be a positive thing. And if the death ratio is much lower, multiple millions infected. But Easter, it's going to be different this year, that's for sure. Like we touched on it, the social distancing, it's going to be you and your immediate family at home, not gathering with extended family like you do if you celebrate the holiday out there. That'll be a change for everyone as well. And It's just a crazy time, that's for sure. But one last point here to wrap up the first segment. Shout out to the different companies and manufacturing plants that are now providing masks or other essential needs for these healthcare workers relative to Major League Baseball fanatics. Michael Rubin, minority owner of the Philadelphia 76ers, he's instructed the plant locally in Pennsylvania to stop producing jerseys and now make gowns and masks out of the material that the jerseys were made of. And obviously it's not medical grade like the best of the best, but they're running out of masks, and I've seen pictures of trash bags being used. So shout out to Michael Rubin, shout out to the other manufacturers that are doing things like this to try to help out as much as they can. But coming up here in the next segment, we'll talk about the agreement that was recently struck between Major League Baseball and the MLBPA. You guys, I'm sure, have read about it out there. I'll give you my takes on what exactly it means for the future of baseball and the future moving forward. But for right now, hang with us here. We're going to pause for a word from one of our partnering shows here at the GSMC Podcast Network. Once again, this is the GSMC Baseball Podcast. I am Kevin Mahalik. Hang with us here for just a second. We'll be back talking Major League Baseball.
This is your ultimate stop for everything sports. The Golden State Media Concepts Sports Podcast. Should I say more? From the NFL, MLB, the NBA to MMA, it's all in here. The Golden State Media Concepts Sports Podcast. Listen now.
Welcome back to the GSMC Baseball Podcast, brought to you by the GSMC Podcast Network. I am your host, Kevin Mahalik. If you're just joining us, we talked about the coronavirus in the first segment, not only within the United States, but also internationally, what's going on out there, what we can expect moving forward as we head to the month of April. And depending on your location, obviously you're dealing with a different situation than others, both here domestically and internationally. But as we always do here, transitioning into the second segment, discussing the coronavirus and its relationship with Major League Baseball. Having talked to you guys last Thursday, as we discuss here Monday and Thursday on the Baseball Podcast, the MLBPA and the MLB struck a deal on Friday that will basically shape and outline the sport of baseball, not only for the rest of this summer, but moving into 2021 and 2022 as well. And on the surface, the initial reaction or the initial feedback is that the players have won this round, I guess, for lack of a better term, because they won essentially the doomsday scenario that we've been talking about. If there is no season this summer, if for some reason this virus continues to spiral out of control moving forward and there really is no flattening of the curve that we're all trying to work towards here while being in our quarantine, is the players will still receive full service time, or the service time will reflect 2019. So I say full service time, referencing basically all of your major league players. And on the surface, this is a huge win for the likes of Mookie Betts, Trevor Bauer, JT Realmuto will all be free agents if there are no baseball this summer. And just pausing there, with the current situation that we're in here heading into April, potentially playing into November, December, if you are going to be a free agent and the uncertainty, there's no way you're signing an extension right now. As a Philadelphia fan, JT Realmuto, the best catcher in baseball, we traded our best overall pitching prospect for him, thinking that, yes, we're going to re-sign him after this arbitration is finalized, because, again, he wanted to set a precedent for all catchers moving forward. And with where the Phillies are at in regard to the luxury tax, it made sense to have him on his $10 million deal this year and then extend him for the big dollars. But now that if there's not a season, or even if there's a shortened season, he's so close to free agency that it makes no sense for him to sign an extension now. And for the Phillies, that is a huge blow, because now you're allowing other teams to come in and bid ridiculous money. They may not give him smart contracts, but if they give him enough money, he could leave. And then you made a trade for, yes, the best catcher in baseball, but for only a year because you didn't play this year, or a year and a half, depending on how many games you get in. And for Mookie Betts and the LA Dodgers, they gave up top prospects, and he may not even play a game in a Dodgers uniform. Could you imagine being the owner of the LA Dodgers or the general manager possibly being ridiculed in years down the line because Mookie Betts never played, and now this pitching prospect is lighting it up in Boston, and you gave him up for literally nothing because you didn't get anything out of Mookie, and then he walked and signed somewhere else. That's fascinating from a surface level perspective. But the reason the owners kind of gave on this is because they realized that the optics of being an owner right now, being a millionaire, billionaire, when I don't know what the percentage is, 80% of America now has some sort of concern monetarily moving forward about bills, responsibilities, this, that, and the third, and you have $1 billion to your name. The moment you cut or agree not to pay somebody, that's when the bad publicity comes in, and they know that you don't want to be the bad guy right now with all of this going along, like the Sixers owner we discussed briefly last episode, cutting costs and then within 2 days reversing course due to all that bad pub. But just a fascinating deal there based on service time. That was the biggest concern for players. Basically, the players they want to play as many games as possible. They're open to doubleheaders. They're open to playing neutral sites down the line. They just want to play. They love the sport. It's not too taxing on the body to play 3 doubleheaders per week if you're extending the roster, giving somebody a day off or a game off in there. Isn't it too absurd to think about? But the fact that now in the back of their mind, hey, if we don't even have a season, this is where I stand in regard to service time. I'll be moving up a year in arbitration. I'll make more next year just based on that time, relieved a lot of doubt from the players' perspective. And what the players gave in on after getting this service time agreement was some of the money, the money that they will be owed if there isn't a season. They agreed not to sue the major league teams or baseball for their full salary. And for some smaller market teams who have a handful of contracts that are large contracts, there was concern that this could really, really hurt them financially if they had to go down not only through lawsuits but eventually paying out those salaries. They weren't sure how they were going to do that without generating the income of the games. That literally the revenue from tickets, food, all of that stuff was how they were able to pay those salaries, the likes of the Oakland Athletics or the Tampa Bay Rays or the smaller market teams to which we know aren't playing in front of full ballparks every day, even if they are making the playoffs. It's just fascinating to kind of see here. So the players basically said, hey, if we don't play, it's okay. You don't have to pay us our full salary, but we want our full service time granted. And that's really how they were able to meet in the middle, and that was the biggest hurdle. And the rest of the details kind of iron themselves out almost as they expand. But back to the pay, they decided if there isn't a season, there's going to be 4 tiers or 4 classes of big leaguers, basically your stars, going down to your big league contracts, your guaranteed deals, and then eventually going all the way down to your minor league contracts and figuring out how those will now be calculated into the payment scale. So your top dogs won't be getting as much as they're supposed to be, but a lot of their guaranteed income will be compensated through that $170 million. But just a fascinating thought to think about the likes of Mookie Betts, JT Realmuto, Trevor Bauer, all becoming free agents without playing this additional season this summer or fall, whenever it may happen. But another headline coming out of the agreement was the MLB draft. That was a big discussion as well. There were concessions with the draft just due to revenue and income and being able to pay out signing bonuses and draft rounds, draft slot compensation. The agreement was that the owners can take this anywhere from 5 rounds to 40. The standard MLB draft is 40 rounds. This is due to all of the minor league levels and teams. That's why they have so many rounds, unlike football, which is only 7 rounds. Basically, they can take it from 40 all the way down to 5 right where they want it because they're saying they don't have the income to pay these guys 6th, 7th, 8th round typical money if there is not a season or they're not generating revenue. So this stinks for sure for kids like myself who are at the lower level, Division I level. They tend to be lower round draft picks, somewhere in the 30s, the 20s, and even my buddy Ryan Presley, thinking about it now, he was a 13th overall pick way back when, so he won't fulfill that lifelong dream of getting drafted or receiving that phone call saying, hey, we're going to take you with this pick, or watching Major League Baseball Network, seeing your name scroll across the bottom. That's a really nice moment for a lot of these kids who have worked really hard, and now ultimately that's going to be taken from them, as well as moving into 2021 and 2022. There are stipulations that they can invoke with the draft to make adjustments, whether it's rounds, money, everything like that. The international signing period has been postponed, pushed back. There's monetary changes that have been made, not only for this summer, but next summer, the summer after that. But a lot of the questions we've been talking about, they have ironed out the toughest ones, and then things such as the schedule, or how many games are going to be played, or where they're going to be played, how long they're going to be played. They basically said, well, we agree to continue to reconvene and figure things out as we move forward, which I think is the right move. Ultimately, the roster is going to expand. That has come out over the weekend as well, up to 29 from 26. That's for pitching. Like we talked about, if you're playing these doubleheaders, if you're playing more games in less time, you're going to need more starting pitching. You're going to need 6, 7 pitchers in the starting rotation, or you're going to go bullpen. You're going to need a few more arms, long relief that'll be able to help you sustain longer innings in a shorter amount of time. But that's basically the long short of the deal there. The doomsday scenario of no season, they were able to come together and figure out what they want to do if that is the case. And that was good news for baseball, good news for us fans out there continuing to work together, be on the same page, because there are the other leagues, the NBA, NHL, they haven't done something like this yet. So to see MLB figure things out kind of on that big of a level was really good news at the end of last week. So that wraps up the second segment here of the GSMC Baseball Podcast, brought to you by the GSMC Podcast Network. We're going to pause right now from a word from one of our other shows here at GSMC. When we come back, though, we're going to continue around our previews and predictions. We're going to get into the National League Playoff preview. Stick with us.
Tired of searching the vast jungle of podcasts? Now listen close and hear this out. There's a podcast network that covers just about everything that you've been searching. Hey! The Golden State Media Concepts Podcast Network is here. Nothing less than a podcast bliss with endless hours of podcast coverage. From news, sports, music, fashion, cooking, entertainment, fantasy, football, and so much more. So stop lurking around and go straight out to the Golden State Media Concepts Podcast Network. Guaranteed to fill that podcast itch. Whatever it may be. Visit us at www.gsmcpodcast.com. Follow us on Facebook and Twitter, and download us on iTunes, SoundCloud, and Google Play.
And thank you for listening to the GSMC Baseball Podcast, brought to you by the GSMC Podcast Network. I'm your host, Kevin Mahalik. Today is Monday, March 30th. Recording this here Sunday night. It is another weekend, the end of March already, transitioning into the month of April as we continue on for the quarantine that we're all involved with here. Hashtag stay home, hashtag stay safe. Hopefully everybody out there is doing their part, doing what we can to flatten the curve so we can get sports, and more specifically baseball, back out there on the field as soon as possible. And in this segment, as you guys know, over the past couple of weeks, we've previewed every division across Major League Baseball, and now we are up to the NL playoffs. I'm going to give you guys my thoughts on the National League Playoff preview who's going to win the divisions, what we're going to do with the wild cards, and then we're going to go a little bit outside of the box just based on where we're at here in 2020 and how there could be expansion to the playoffs due to a shortened regular season. But ultimately, if you've been listening the past couple of weeks, you know my predictions on each division. I'll just run through what I have going on there for you guys. I had the Dodgers winning the National League West. No surprise there. Obviously, LA is loaded as a ball club, making the Mookie Betts trade, adding David Price to an already loaded rotation, Clayton Kershaw, that lineup out there, Cody Bellinger, Jock Peterson. They have all the weapons, all of the arms, all of the ingredients for another 100-win season, another strong season, whatever that winning percentage is. I think, obviously, the Dodgers are the favorite in the NL West, and nobody should argue with me there. Transitioning to the NL Central, I had the St. Louis Cardinals winning this division, and there is some discussion here in the NL Central. I think it's a deeper division than probably the West is, with the Reds, the Cubs, the Brewers all potentially putting it together. The Brewers won the division last year. The Cubs make a change at manager with David Ross. The Reds added Trevor Bauer. So there is some change and some opportunity there, but I'm going with the St. Louis Cardinals. Steady, strong, Goldschmidt, Molina behind the dish once again leading the way. I just think that is a professionally run organization. They know what to expect over the course of a summer of baseball, and ultimately, once again, I think they'll find themselves right there come playoff time. In the NL East, the Atlanta Braves winning this division once again, winning over 100 games, in my opinion, this year as well, being right there with the Dodgers, challenging them for the best overall record in the National League. I think their lineup is as strong as anybody. Freddie Freeman, Acuna Jr., yes, they're going to have to replace Donaldson, but they feel they're going to be able to do that. Adding some names to the rotation, some veterans, Felix Hernandez, Cole Hamels, looking to make that run. Continued success in the National League East. And rounding out the standings, basically will put you into my next wild card situation. I had the Washington Nationals behind them just based on starting pitching. I don't think their lineup is as deep as Atlanta's, but the top end of Scherzer, Strasburg, and Corbin, difficult for anybody to line up against in a three-game set, that's for sure. And then the Phillies, I think, overtake the Mets after the Tommy John news with Syndergaard, with Thor there. I believe one less starter for them, and the Mets just are the Mets. So they'll finish third behind the Phillies, and that's where the wild card gets fun. So Dodgers, number 1 seed, I have them out of the West. Braves, the 2 out of the NL East. The Cardinals, the 3. Then we get to the standard 5-team formation or bracket for the playoffs, with the Washington Nationals being the first wild card team. They were a wild card team last year. I think they'll finish there again. I don't think they have the offense, but when it comes playoff time, either one game, best of 5, best of 7, you put those starters out there, you can line those up against anybody and feel good about your chances. Where the fun begins is in that wild card 2 spot for myself, and I have the surprise team in the summer. I have 2 surprises, one on each side. This one is the Cincinnati Reds. I think the Reds are going to shock some people this year, and honestly, I think it may be more of a cause of the situation around them, because I think the Cubs are going to continue to slide. I think they're getting older. I think they're going to have to rebuild. Theo Epstein has said he's willing to potentially move on from some pieces because they're not going to be able to pay everybody. Chris Bryant, rumored to be on the trade market. The Phillies very interested in possibly reuniting him with Bryce Harper, childhood friends, Rizzo. I think the Cubs, as they get through the summer or the fall, whatever time of year it is, get close to that trade deadline, they'd be more on the seller side than the buyer side, thinking long-term, thinking future, which slides them down in the division. And then the Milwaukee Brewers, with the amount of change that they've had, the lack of big additions, in my opinion, will limit their success this year. Yes, Christian Yelich should continue to improve, should be better than he was last year when he was the MVP and one of the best players in the major leagues. But that's why I think they are going to continue to slide, haven't added enough, which then Reds come in and basically based on the rotation. I think the top end of that rotation is disgusting. Adding Trevor Bauer to the mix, if they do have a season, is that one ingredient that will put them over the top. A deeper lineup than I think most are looking at. So that's where I have the standard matchup of 5 teams for the playoffs. Nationals, Reds in the wild card, Braves, Cardinals, Dodgers. Nothing crazy happening there. I would have the Nationals over the Reds in the wild card game. That will then transition into them playing the Dodgers in the first round. But before we get there, I want to discuss if Major League Baseball were to implement some of the changes that were floated around only a few months ago around the owners' meetings, potentially for, 2022, moving forward, things like that. But say there are 7 teams, 7 playoff teams. This gives one team a bye, and then you allow the next seeds to choose who they would play against in that first round. And this is where I think this would become a lot of fun, honestly. This is why I think Commissioner Manfred was talking more and discussing this, because in my scenario, I would have the Dodgers just beating the Atlanta Braves for that best overall record in the National League. And because of this, they would then get a bye in this first round between these other 6 teams. Okay, not a problem. So then that puts the Braves at number 2 and allows them first choice of wild card teams to play. Now, back to the original standings. My 6th and 7th wild card teams would be the Arizona Diamondbacks. I believe the Diamondbacks out west just because the rest of that division I think is not very good. The San Francisco Giants are going to be at the bottom. The Colorado Rockies are going to be at the bottom of the league. The San Diego Padres may be around 500. And I think the Diamondbacks are going to be good enough with that offense and some of that pitching out there to kind of feast on the bottom half of that division, put their record in that 85 win mark, which will get you to that 3rd wild card at this point. And then the 4th wild card, I'm homering it here. The Philadelphia Phillies, they'll just beat out the Cubs, who would be 3rd in the Central, and then the Padres 3rd in the West. So I think the Phillies would get that 7th spot. And the reason I think choosing your competition here would be fascinating, because the Braves would be up next as the 2. Technically, the Phillies would be the 7 seed, so it would make the most sense to play the worst team. I don't think the Braves would choose them. I think choosing the Phillies in that instance would light a fire in that clubhouse and in the city of Philadelphia and anger us to the point where they would run into problems because, oh, you want to play us? Oh, you've beaten us all year? Well, this is different now. This is the postseason. We're going top of the end starters, top rotation. We're coming at you. So, honestly, I think they would pick the Diamondbacks in that scenario, which would then allow the Cardinals to come in. They would rather face the Phillies than the Reds or Nationals. So you would have Cardinals versus the Phillies, Braves versus the Diamondbacks, and then, yes, the Nationals and Reds would still face off against each other. And then even though if they expand the playoffs, I think we ultimately end up right back where we were for if there were only 5 teams to make the postseason. I think the Braves beat the Diamondbacks, the Cardinals beat the Phillies, and the Nationals beat the Reds. That leaves you with the matchup of the Dodgers versus the Nationals and the Cardinals versus the Braves. Okay, basically a rematch of last year's playoff bracket. I would take the Dodgers over the Nationals in this case. I think this is finally the year where the Dodgers get over the hump. I think the loss of Anthony Rendon for the Nationals and their offense wouldn't be to the tier they would need it to in a 5-game series to advance against the Dodgers, even though, like I said, that pitching would be fun to watch. Absolutely. And then on the flip side, the Braves get revenge against the Cardinals in a series that went 5 games last year, and then the Braves lost before they even got an out in the first inning. What a wild game that was. The Braves bounced back. Then we got Braves-Dodgers, the top 2 teams in the league. Ultimately, a 5-7 game series, maybe neutral field. Who knows where we'll be. The Dodgers would be favored on paper just due to the rotation, due to their talent, but I think the Braves would challenge them, and the Dodgers win in 6 or 7 to ultimately win the National League. But what a fascinating year that would be based on all of my previews, predictions. I think some of those series would be fantastic. I would love to see Cardinals, Phillies, Nationals, Reds. Let's expand it. Let's go 7 teams. Let's have some fun here in the playoffs. But that wraps up our NL prediction here, the 3rd segment of the GSMC Baseball Podcast. I'm your host, Kevin Mahalik. I appreciate everybody listening out there. Let's pause for a word from another one of our shows here at GSMC. And then on the flip side, for the next segment, we'll give you guys the AL, the American League playoff preview. Stick around.
Want to know the latest in soccer? Then listen to the Golden State Media Concepts Soccer Podcast. From MLS, the World Cup, and the Premier League, we've got you covered. The latest updates, the hottest matches, and news on the league's top players. It's the Golden State Media Concepts Soccer Podcast.
David Beckham scores the goal to take England all the way to the World Cup finals.
Listen now.
Welcome back to the fourth segment here of the GSMC Baseball Podcast, brought to you by the GSMC Podcast Network. I'm your host, Kevin Mahalik. I appreciate you guys listening on what is hopefully a beautiful day wherever you are. I know we had about 1.5 inches of rain here in the greater Philadelphia area this past weekend, so it was a little bit difficult in quarantine, even unable to get out there, play in the yard, walk around the neighborhood. So we made it through. We're continuing to be strong, stay positive out there. Talk all things Major League Baseball with you lovely listeners out there. I appreciate each and every one of you. If you haven't done so yet, do me a favor, please. Scroll down if you're listening on Apple Podcasts. Click 5 stars. Write us a review. Those help spread the word and work with Apple to expand and get this podcast in front of people who are baseball fans or whatever platform you're listening out there. Give us a review, give us a like, follow us on social media as well, GSMC Baseball, GSMC Podcast Network. We appreciate each and every one of you out there. But last segment, we talked about the National League. I talked about who I believe is going to win each division, ultimately who is going to win the pennant. I think the Dodgers and Braves are headed on a collision course towards the NL Championship Series. I do think the Dodgers win the National League this year and advance to the World Series. But here in this segment, in the fourth segment, we're going to talk about the American League, give you guys a preview if you've been listening these past couple weeks. I believe that it's going to be a little bit of a status quo in the American League, honestly. The New York Yankees in the American League East, the favorite, maybe not only in the American League, but to win the entire thing. The Houston Astros, they continue to be a strong player, one of the top teams in all of Major League Baseball. And then the Minnesota Twins, based on what they did last year, their offseason moves, should be right there again to win those divisions. The New York Yankees, I think, will have the top record in the American League. It'll be between them and the Houston Astros, with Garrett Cole transitioning from Houston to New York. I think he is the difference maker for the 105-win New York Yankees compared to the 100-win Houston Astros, if they do get in that many games this summer and fall. But once again, that could prove to be a huge deal if they agree to expand the playoff field. So your winners of the division, the Yankees, Twins, and Astros, no changes there from the 2019 season. For the American League wild cards, the Tampa Bay Rays and the Oakland Athletics. Once again, I'm picking the Athletics just based on past performance, based on some of the additions this offseason. They always seem to put it together, play good baseball. Moneyball out there in Oakland lives on, and they advance to another postseason. Where the fun would really start to begin in the American League is, like we talked about in the previous segment, if they expand the playoff field to 7 teams and add an additional 2 wild cards, you're going to have a ton of teams clumped together in that next tier, so to speak, of potential wild card teams. And, you know, everybody from the Toronto Blue Jays in the American League East, I don't think the Red Sox or Orioles will be flirting with the playoffs whatsoever this year. In the Central, I think the likes of the White Sox and the Indians will be right there in that potential conversation. And then out west, the LA Angels and the Texas Rangers. So you're going to have 5 teams even in that next tier. So 7 total would be battling there for 2 probably 4 playoff teams, because I think this type of expansion is going to be more likely the longer this delay happens for Major League Baseball. And if they're only getting 80 games in, well, heck, we might as well play a few extra postseason games to make that revenue back, as well as the players aren't going to argue, because a lot of times 80 games isn't enough games to decide who the best team is based on the length of a typical season. So in my estimation, I think this is where it gets fun. I have the LA Angels actually as the 3rd wild card. So I have the Rays and then the A's and then the Angels being right behind them, pushing the A's even for that 2nd spot. And then the 4th wild card team, my surprise team in this league. I told you guys last segment I had the Cincinnati Reds in the NL being the surprise. Well, the Chicago White Sox are going to be the surprise in the American League. I think their young talent, as well as the additions they've made from a professional perspective, professional at-bats, professional players who will be able to bring along the young guys in that locker room and in that clubhouse, they're going to make a move. They're going to be over 500 this year, and that may be enough to be that 4th wildcard team. 84 and 78, something like that. 82 and 80. Who knows where that final wild card spot would go to? But once again, let's start out with the 7-team scenario where teams are choosing their opponents, because the New York Yankees, like I said, the top team, they'll get the bye. They'll advance to the 2nd round. The other 6 teams we'll discuss. The Houston Astros, I think, will beat out the Minnesota Twins for that 2nd spot and first opportunity. I think this one goes a little bit more status quo with the tiers, honestly. If you're the Astros, you're not picking the Rays or the A's. Those 2 teams would be clearly a cut above 3 and 4. And then with the familiarity of the LA Angels, I don't think they would choose them as well, being a divisional team like I talked about with the Phillies and Braves. I think the motivation within the division, unless they go 15-0 or however many games against them in the regular season and are undefeated, that's where I think, that could have that conversation. Hey, we smoked these guys every time during the regular season, so we might as well just run it back with them one more time here in the playoffs. If that's not the case, I think they go Chicago White Sox. I think their experience in the postseason, Verlander at the top of the rotation, Greinke at the top of the rotation, they'll say, hey, give me the kids in Chicago. We'll overwhelm them with the moment. We'll let the playoffs get the better of them over the course of 3 or 5 games, whatever the length of series they decide it would be. If this does happen, that allows the Twins for next pick. They're not going to pick the Rays or the A's. They're going to go LA Angels. I don't think LA is somebody to take lightly for the playoffs. Obviously, you get Mike Trout, you get Ohtani, you get some of the other moves they've made, adding pitching this offseason. They could sneak up on some people and potentially steal a game or 2 against that Twins rotation, because that would just be a fun series to watch, because both teams' offenses being the strengths of their team, a lot of runs scored, a lot of home runs, a lot of 8-6 playoff games between the Twins and Angels, which I'm all for. Give me more of that. And then the Rays versus the A's. The Rays would get to pick. They would have the A's, so it would be home field essentially. And what was, I believe, a rematch of last year's postseason wildcard game as well, where I think Tampa Bay would advance to that next round to face the teams next round. So let's look at it here. If that's the case, okay, the Astros would play the White Sox. I think Houston would advance in that series. The Twins versus the Angels. I do believe the Angels would give the Twins a run for their money in that case. I don't think it would be a sweep, but I'll give the benefit of the doubt to the Minnesota Twins moving on. And then, like I just touched on, the Tampa Bay Rays winning that series against the Oakland A's and advancing. That takes you to which would have been the scenario of just 4 teams. So even with expansion, I think we would get to chalk and right where we would be if we were at 4 teams. Yes, it would be more fun to watch them win an additional series and additional playoff games, but I don't think it would change the outcome either way in either conference, with the Yankees playing the Rays, the Yankees ultimately advancing, just overwhelming Tampa Bay over the course of 5 games. Come playoff time, the depth of their lineup, Stanton, Judge, all of the above, advancing on. And then the Houston Astros advance over the Twins, the likes of Verlander, Greinke at the top of the rotation. They're able to silence the Minnesota Twins bats just enough to advance to face the Yankees. And then once again, I know it's chalk. I know a lot of the experts out there are predicting it. I see the New York Yankees as the top team in the American League. Garrett Cole transitioning over to New York. Yes, they did lose Severino, but Tanaka, a great postseason performer. I can trust him in a big moment with the Yankees, and only having 2 top-end starters for the Houston Astros and not that third in Cole or Greinke, and the depth or lack thereof, I think will play out in what should be a 7-game series at that point. I think even if you go 3-5-7 throughout the postseason, first round 3, second 5, championship series 7, World Series 7, I think the fans would be happy with that, and that would cut down on the dates almost a week to 2 weeks if you are into the month of November and playing at neutral sites, which, depending on it, if you're in New York, it's going to be too cold come November, so they could be playing in New York spring training facility down south, because in the National League, the Dodgers, the weather would be fine, and in Atlanta, a warm enough area down there in Georgia, as well as Houston, would still be hot enough to play in November. So the Yankees could be the only ones there playing in neutral sites. And then come World Series, I don't know if you're going to want to play a World Series game in a Yankees spring training facility there, but Dodgers-Yankees is my World Series, ultimately being a toss-up. But just to round it out here for the preview all the way across the board for you guys, I would take the LA Dodgers to win over the New York Yankees. I think the Dodgers finally get over the hump, however many years later, of continuing to try and try and try. I think they finally get over the hump again, win the World Series over the evil empire and the New York Yankees. But I could certainly be convinced that the Yankees would take that series depending on health and where we're at, location, all of the above. But Dodgers potentially being at home, the Yankees potentially being in a spring training facility, I think LA would take advantage and win that series. So that wraps up the preview series. That wraps up all the predictions we had. We did every division, every conference. I got the Yankees or Dodgers facing off in the World Series, with the Dodgers ultimately having a parade here come, who knows, December. Well, we'll call it Christmas or January. But thanks again for listening here to the GSMC Baseball Podcast, brought to you by the GSMC Podcast Network. I am Kevin Mahalik. We're going to pause for a word from one of our other shows here within the network. And on the flip side, we're going to talk about what would have been opening day and discuss some of the best performances in opening day history. So stick around with us here. We'll be right back.
Are you looking to get your college football fixed? Looking to get the latest news on your favorite school's team? The GSMC College Football Podcast is your ticket to all things college football. Join us as we talk college football, from the national championship, the college rivalries, the bowl game, to the Heisman Trophy. To which conference is the best? We've got you covered for the Big Ten, SEC, Big 12, the Pac-12, ACC, and everything in between. Download the GSMC College Football Podcast on iTunes, Stitcher, SoundCloud, Google Play, or anywhere you find podcasts. Just type GSMC in the search bar.
Hello and welcome back to the GSMC Baseball Podcast, brought to you by the GSMC Podcast Network. If you're just joining us, the last couple of segments, I previewed the American and National League playoff predictions and playoff scenarios that I have based on my division winners and where I think everybody's going to be finishing. If you've been listening over the course of the last couple of weeks, we ran through every division, and then just now we touched on the playoffs, which led to the Dodgers and Yankees in the World Series, with the Braves and Astros just missing out, losing in the Conference Championship Series. We also touched on expanded playoffs, which I think would be a lot of fun in this scenario. If you're playing 80, 100 games, expand the playoffs, go 3 games, best of 3 in the first round, best of 5 in the original divisional round, best of 7 in the conference championship, best of 7 in the World Series. And I think we're going to have a lot of fun over what would be about a month of baseball if that were the case, even if there weren't any days off. But based on the fact that today is Monday, March 30th, talking to you guys now, we have officially missed out on the opening weekend of baseball. Opening day would have been last week, and because of that, I thought in this segment, I wanted to talk to you guys about the best opening day performances in the history of Major League Baseball. For everyone listening out there, when you think about the best opening day performance, what's the first memory that comes to mind? Obviously, it'll be relative to your local city. I myself, even last year, Andrew McCutchen in Philadelphia, Philadelphia, hitting a leadoff home run, a leadoff bomb to start off the season. The first at-bat, that was a lot of fun in Bryce Harper's debut. So even relatively new memories are very positive and important to myself. But as I was doing some research looking back on it, there have been some really good opening day performances. And let's start out on the pitching mound. Let's break it down by pitching and hitting, because I don't know how you're going to rank them one or the other, 10-1. I'm just going to talk about the best overall performances, discussing them. But last year, there was one that jumped out on me. Jose Barrios for the Minnesota Twins. He set the tone right away, right on opening day, for them to ultimately go on and win that division through 7 2/3 scoreless innings against the Cleveland Indians. It was a win 2-0 for him. He struck out 10, only walked 1, gave up 2 hits in 7 2/3. A very impressive outing from Barrios, again, kind of setting the tone for the rest of the year. Jeff Samardzija, all the way back in 2013, 8 innings, no runs, 2 hits, 9 strikeouts. Jared Weaver back in 2012, along with Justin Masterson in 2012. They both went 8 innings, no runs, or Masterson gave up 1 run, 10 strikeouts. Pretty insane. But for the top performance in the modern era, is what we can call it for Major League Baseball, that has to go to Clayton Kershaw. 2013, Dodgers versus the Giants, a rivalry, hated teams, opening day. Kershaw throws a complete game shutout, 7 strikeouts, no walks, only gives up 4 hits. And to top it off, the guy went yard at the plate, hit a home run. Opening day, afternoon game, complete game shutout. Basically was like, yo, if I'm the only guy playing today, that's all we need here, because I'm going to go yard for my run support. Yes, they ended up winning 4-0, so there was more than just the home run. But complete game shutout and a home run at the plate, tough to argue with that as being the top performance in recent memory for opening day, at least for the millennials out there and the Gen Z. Now, transitioning to what is called the quote-unquote classic era now, a little bit older times. One of them being Bob Gibson back in 1967. A complete game shutout for Bob. 13 strikeouts, no walks, only 5 hits as the St. Louis Cardinals beat the San Francisco Giants 6-0 on that day. Another one is Lon Warneke back in 1934. Anybody out there listening to this pod that was alive in 1934, please reach out via social media, which I know you're using, but they won 6-0. Let's see, the Cubs, that is, they beat the Reds 6-0. Warneke threw a complete game shutout, 13 strikeouts, only 2 walks. Ridiculous. Walter Johnson, this is one that stands out here as well as maybe the best overall performance, the only one that potentially beats Clayton Kershaw's both at the plate and on the mound, is because of the fact Walter Johnson in 1926 for Washington against Philadelphia in a 1-0 victory. Walter went 15 innings, 0 runs, 6 hits, 9 strikeouts, 15 innings for Walter Johnson. Just amazing. He was 38 years old at that point. 38, throwing 15 innings. Just, wow. How does that, what a different game back then than it was now. But yeah, 1926, 15 scoreless innings for Walter Johnson. And then more recently in 2013, 9 scoreless and a home run for Clayton Kershaw. Is probably the best 2 pitching performances ever to be recorded on the mound opening day. Transitioning now to the hitters, and we'll call this one the 3 home run club. Only a handful of people have hit 3 home runs opening day, and there are gaps between these years. Most recently, Matt Davidson did it for the Chicago White Sox in 2018. He went 3 for 4 with 3 home runs and 5 RBIs with a walk and 5 plate appearances. His team won the game 14-7. He was the first guy to do it since Dimitri Young in 2005. Dimitri went 4 for 4 with 3 home runs and 5 RBIs. Whew, baby, an 11-2 win. Tuffy Rhodes in 1994 in a loss, in an 8-12 loss. The Mets lost to the Cubs, but he was 4 for 4 with 3 home runs, 3 RBIs. So 3 solo shots for Tuffy back in 1994. Tough day. Somebody get on base for Tuffy. Come on, let's go. George Bell in 1988, he went 3 for 4 with 3 home runs, 4 RBIs. But that's it. Only 4 guys have hit 3 home runs opening day. There's been a handful that have hit 2, but those are the only ones that hit 3. Wow, only 4 guys. I thought it would have been more of that doing the research here. But there are some other obviously great games opening day, like Raul Mondesi in 1999 for the Dodgers. He was 4 for 5, had 2 home runs and 6 RBIs in a win for the Dodgers over the Diamondbacks. A very impressive opening day for Raul Mondesi. Jim Presley, a third baseman in 1986 for the Mariners. He was 3 for 4, 2 home runs, 6 RBIs, and an 8-4 win over the Angels. It's just, man, it's fascinating. Kirk Gibson, everybody remembers Kirk Gibson. Well, in 86 for the Tigers in opening day, he went 4 for 4, a couple of home runs, 5 RBIs. He had 5 out of the 6 RBIs for the Tigers as they beat the Red Sox. And, man, just, it's fun to watch, you know, opening day when people put this together right off the bus, right off of Florida. Pete Rose, 1974 for the Reds. 3 for 5, 2 doubles, 3 runs, an RBI, a walk, and a 7-6 game. Just fascinating what Pete Rose, as well as Rose, who has 31 hits in opening day or on opening day. That is an all-time record, 31 total hits opening day. I don't have who's second here. That would be if anybody out there listening knows who is second in opening day hits behind Pete Rose, reach out to us here at the GSMC Baseball Podcast on social media. And we'd love to hear from you guys. We'll play that on the show here when somebody comes back and lets us know. But, yeah, those are the top opening day performances. Like I said, last Thursday would have been opening day, as well as, hey, for the first time, Major League Baseball was going to give us baseball on Friday. Usually they have opening day, and then everyone is off on Friday, and then they reconvene for the weekend of baseball. This year they were going right through, and it's a shame we couldn't even enjoy that aspect of the schedule. And I hated that as a fan. Hey, opening day's back. You want to go right into it. As a college player, you rock and roll. There's no, hey, big spectacle of opening day, and then everybody's off tomorrow, and then we're actually back ready to roll on Saturday. They were going to roll right through it. And once again, that was taken from us just due to the coronavirus and everything going on. But what's your favorite memory of opening day? Let us know out there. Hit us up on Twitter, GSMC Baseball, as well as Facebook. We want to interact with you, the fans out there. We want to hear what your favorite memory is for opening day, however long ago it may be, whether it's the 70s, 80s for you older individuals listening out there, or if it was 2019 like McCutcheon hitting a leadoff bomb like people like myself, where the Phillies typically lose on opening day. So having a positive memory and a positive response, that felt good, and I won't forget that for the near future. But that wraps up this segment here of the GSMC Baseball Podcast. I appreciate you guys listening once again. We've talked about a lot up until this point. We talked coronavirus, the new agreement between the MLB and the MLBPA. I then finished up my preview series for you guys, having the Dodgers and Yankees go at it for the World Series. Ultimately, wrapping up that segment, that was a lot of fun giving you guys those thoughts. And then just now, obviously talking about what would have been opening day and the amount of fun that we would have had as fans out there. But in the sixth and final segment on the other side, from a word from one of our other shows here within the GSMC network, we're going to talk about the top 6 expansion cities for Major League Baseball. Yes, I don't know why it came to me. I like to have some fun. We're talking expansion cities and where the MLB should go the next time they look to add a team. So hang with us here for just a second. We'll be right back.
Are you looking for the very best NFL and college football podcast? Then check out the GSMC Football Podcast. Get the latest football news both on and off the field. From the NFL Draft to trades to the rumor mill to the NFL Combines. They got you covered. That's GSMCpodcast.com/football-podcast. Get updates on college rivalries, game day insights, and much, much more. It's football talk the way you want it. This show eats, sleeps, and breathes football. Don't forget to like them on Facebook and follow them on Twitter. Visit GSMCpodcast.com for more info.
Hello and welcome back to the sixth and final segment of the GSMC Baseball Podcast, brought to you by the GSMC Podcast Network. I am your host, Kevin Mahalik, here Monday, March 30th. Once again, I appreciate everybody listening out there. If you haven't done so yet, our numbers are continuing to rise on the iTunes podcast, as well as during last episode, I told you if you left a review, I would read it here on the show. Well, I want to make sure I'm a man of my word, and we did get a review from one of our lovely listeners out there. As I'm clicking in here, I want to make sure I read it. It is from Athletic SEC. Athletic SEC, whoever you are, they left us a 5-star rating and said they liked hearing about all the ballparks. So that was the review. They liked hearing about the ballparks last episode. So I know you're listening here to this sixth segment. It seems to be one of your favorite segments. Shout out Athletic SEC, who gave us a review. So you guys listening, do the same. Write us your thoughts down there. I'll read them here on the show. We'll talk about it. We'll discuss it. I want this to be as interactive as possible with everybody out there. So appreciate it once again for listening. But let's jump in here. Top expansion cities for Major League Baseball. Now, you're probably thinking, expansion, Kev, with everything going on? Yes, I know. We're having a little bit of fun. But Major League Baseball as a whole is getting back to the point of expansion just due to the amount of people per capita per team is reaching that level, or statistically, where they have expanded or relocated in the past. So it's sooner than you think. And I wanted to give you guys some options. It looks like here the top 5 I have written down. I said top 6 earlier. Only did 5 of them this week for you, but that's not a problem. Let's roll right into it. Number 5, Sacramento, California. Now you're probably thinking Sacramento. Yes, they have the Kings, who have tried to leave in the past. They're the only major professional sports team in Sacramento. But Sacramento, having 2.3 million residents and a relatively high income percentage, in a vacuum, makes for a nice landing spot for these teams. And Mayor Kevin Johnson has already expressed interest in trying to get a professional baseball team. I know he's worked with the Oakland A's to try to get them to relocate based on the issues that they're having with the Coliseum and the stadium and everything along those lines. That hasn't come to fruition yet in any way. But Sacramento has reached out and said, hey, we would like a team. We would be able to put together enough of an audience to make money out there. And I don't think it's at the top of the list just based on some of the metrics and some scenarios. It does make sense. But once again, I just think the MLB could look elsewhere for better options. Next on the list, number 4, Portland, Oregon. Once again, the greater Northwest up there continuing to fill out. Over 2.4 million residents with a high medium income. Basically, that's showing that they have the economy capable of supporting a team. It's a solid 3 hours away from Seattle. It's not that close to Oakland like Sacramento, so there won't be a bias of, well, we already have a team that we're rooting for. Portland would be able to provide a fan base internally that would support the local team as well. Obviously, having the Portland Trail Blazers, they only have the NBA out that way. So I do think that they would be next in line. As you see here, I'm reading, they have the largest metro area in the U.S. without a baseball team, and the largest with only one major sports franchise. So for those of you listening on the East Coast, not aware of the size of Portland, Oregon, it's a large city that could certainly support another team. Yes, they do have strong support for the Timbers in Major League Soccer, but as of the Professional 4, only the Trailblazers are the local professional team to root for. Next on my list, Charlotte, North Carolina. I like Charlotte a lot. Currently, they are the home of the White Sox AAA affiliate, so I know they would quote-unquote have a baseball team, and Charlotte would rank as a very small city in regards to city size when it comes to a baseball team. But Charlotte is a very well-off city. They have one of the largest banking sectors and a lot of corporate partnerships that could take place in the city of Charlotte, as well as October. The temperature is anywhere from 55 to 70 degrees, so they wouldn't have to worry about the weather. And it's just an overall good option. And they have the NFL. Obviously, the Carolina Panthers are based out of Charlotte, so they have an excellent fan base. No problem filling that stadium or supporting both a baseball and football team. It just seems like a good option for Major League Baseball and a great location for the Carolinas, not having an option right now professionally. So that's 3. So 5 Sacramento, 4 Portland, Oregon, 3 Charlotte, North Carolina. Number 2 and number 1, honestly, I think are the most realistic 2 cities that are going to have a team there sooner rather than later. And that's the combination of San Antonio, Texas, and Austin, Texas. They're not far apart. Both cities, I think, if you kind of go in between, should be able to combine and give you a solid fan base. Yes, Texas has 2 teams in baseball with the Texas Rangers and the Houston Astros, but they're both over 2, about 3 hours away from the combination of San Antonio and Austin. So I don't think there would be that much crossover in regards to fanship as well. But the metro area of San Antonio is just growing exponentially, as well as myself playing in the Texas Collegiate League, which played locally in the towns of Victoria, Texas, Weimar, Texas, McKinney, Texas, outside of the major metropolitan areas, and we were college kids from all over the country, Division 1, 2, 3, JUCO levels all put together. State College had a team down there, and they were able to get 3,000 people at these games, no problem. And if 3,000 people are going to see basically no-name college kids play the sport of baseball, there's going to be no problem filling a stadium in the city of San Antonio or in Austin, which is the capital. The University of Texas, UT, is located in Austin. They have a passionate following there for baseball, a huge stadium, excellent stadium. So you put a team somewhere down there, you're going to find the people, the locals to support and go to the ball games. But my number 1 city, and the city that is growing come professional sports exponentially, Las Vegas, Nevada. It's got to be Las Vegas. They recently opened up the Las Vegas Golden Knights, the hockey team, which has since gone to the Stanley Cup Finals. The theatrics that they put on pregame, it's almost like a play or a show and a performance that's put on before even the actual game goes on. They got knights battling, sword fighting on the ice, their projection on the ice, just fantastic. And then as well as the Oakland Raiders relocating down to Las Vegas to be the Las Vegas Raiders. They're going to have a beautiful new football stadium not far from the Strip, which already the locals have shown a ton of passion for and a ton of energy for to move forward. So obviously adding a baseball team into that market as well, they've shown that they've welcomed a local team in professional sports and have shown that passion that is fantastic and just a lot of fun to watch from the outside. I can only imagine what the football atmosphere is going to be, and if you would put a baseball team in that town, I think they would just take over as well and have a ton of influence in what they need. Also, with the continued national expansion of sports gambling, I myself located here in Pennsylvania. It is now legal here in this state to gamble on sports. That was the initial concern, was having professional teams in a town known for its gambling. Obviously, everybody knows Vegas, the Strip, but as that continues to lessen the fear, the partnerships continue to grow between professional sports and gambling companies. Different leagues have partnered. The NBA very much at the forefront. I know the NFL, FanDuel, have started to have that conversation, started to come together. So that's, obviously the pushback for Vegas, but the Golden Knights, their success, the Raiders, obviously people anticipate a ton of success with them. And then, adding a baseball team as well, I think would just round it out for a huge city. A lot of the tourists, if the Phillies played in Vegas, I would love to go to a game there, to make it a weekend, to have some fun, go see the Birds. That's what I'm going to do. Go see the Eagles when they play the Raiders. It's a touristy town as well. So there wouldn't be a problem pulling in, ticket revenue or filling that stadium as well. So my top 5 MLB expansion cities from 5 to 1, wrapping it up here: Sacramento, California, Portland, Oregon, Charlotte, North Carolina, San Antonio / Austin, Texas, and then Las Vegas, Nevada, rounding out the bunch here to wrap up our 6th and final segment. But recapping everything we've talked about with you guys here on today's episode of the GSMC Baseball Podcast, We talked, of course, about the coronavirus, our first segment discussing everything that's going on globally as well as domestically with that virus, who's on quarantine, stay-at-home orders, what we can expect moving forward as it continues to evolve day to day here. I want to keep all you listeners out there updated on everything that's happening. Then we transition into the new agreement between the MLBPA and the MLB in regards to the coronavirus moving forward. They were able to avoid the doomsday scenario. Players are going to get full service time, but not full compensation. That was the agreement that they were able to come to with both sides, giving up certain victories or certain things to come to that agreement. I then wrapped up our preview prediction. Dodgers-Yankees going to be the World Series this year. I hate to break it to everybody, but it's going to be a lot of the same names that were in the playoffs last year, in my opinion. We then talked about opening day, the best overall performances we've seen. Walter Johnson, Clayton Kershaw, Dimitri Young, all across the board. I want to know what your favorites were out there. And then finally, the top 5 expansion cities. But once again, if you haven't done so, please follow us on social media, GSMC Baseball Podcast. We appreciate it. Share this with your friends, family, whoever's a baseball fan out there. Let them know they would love listening to this podcast moving forward. And I am your host once again, as always, Kevin Mahalik. I appreciate you guys listening. This is the GSMC Baseball Podcast, brought to you by the GSMC Podcast Network. We'll talk to you guys this Thursday in our next edition. Until then, stay safe, stay inside, and hopefully we can flatten this curve. We'll talk to you guys again soon.
You've been listening to the Golden State Media Concepts Baseball Podcast, part of the Golden State Media Concepts Podcast Network. You can find this show and others like it at www.gsmcpodcast.com. Download our podcast on iTunes, Stitcher, SoundCloud, and Google Play. Just type in GSMC to find all the shows from the Golden State Media Concepts Podcast Network, from movies to music, from sports to entertainment, and even weird news. You can also follow us on Twitter and on Facebook. Thank you, and we hope you have enjoyed today's program.